Welcome, everyone. I'm Bill Newell with MSO News Sports, and we are joined by Essex County District Attorney Paul Tucker. Paul, welcome. Thanks so much for taking some time to join us today.
Thank you, Bill. I appreciate it. It's good to see you, and hello to all the listeners.
Well, you're now in office, and I want to get to some of your priorities as district attorney. But I want you to begin. I got a chance to check out your inaugural address, which was back in January at Salem High School. But I thought you did something very interesting, and I think it kind of shapes how you've approached this job. In that address, you read a handful of comments from you. You had your staff fill out kind of, you explain it better than I can, a cover letter, if you will, to you. So this is over 100 employees there at the DA's office,
Yep.
and you shared some of what was important to them. And I thought that it was pretty interesting. So maybe you could share a few notes with us on that, what you shared at your inaugural.
Sure. Thanks, Bill. I'd be happy to. So I was trying to think about what I should say at the inaugural, and I really want to set the tone. And there's no better time to do it than right at the very beginning. So what I had all the employees do, and by the way, there's 170 employees. We have 85 attorneys and 85 support staff between our juvenile justice, victim witness, and the folks that are really doing all the day-to-day work. So what I asked everybody to do if they intended on staying, which frankly 99% of the folks did, which was fantastic, I asked them to send me a cover letter in addition to their resume, and I did it for the sole purpose, really, of seeing who's here and what the various backgrounds and education and lived experiences that folks bring to this job. And it was just amazing the letters that I got back, the personal reflections of how much the job meant to them, how they were standing up on the side of victims, how it felt when they had a case that went to a jury trial, and all of the emotion and feelings. It was quite extraordinary, and there were just so many things that struck me. So I read them all, and then I took a bit of a breather, and I went back and I read all of them again, and I picked out about 5 or 6 of the ones that I really thought kind of captured what the office and what the folks who we serve with are all about. And it was extraordinary what brought people to this job, some things in their life that had made an impression on them, either some type of interaction they'd had with the police or somebody in the social services, how much it meant to stand up for victims of crime and be the voice, sometimes for the voiceless people who have been taken from us in a criminal act. And they range from things that was sobering and poignant all the way to some very funny things. There was one of the women who does a great job for us. She joked that there's 2 microwaves in the lunchroom. Use the one on the left; it works better. So I included that in there. One of our terrific people in the appeals said, "This is the last job I ever want to have. I hope I get to stay here till the end." And just to be able to read through the bill, it was an extraordinary start for me, and it resonated. I think it went over well.
Well, you guys are living large. 2 microwaves in the in
Yeah,
the in the lunch area. Unbelievable there.
it's
That's what I take away from that. I'm sorry. No,
yeah,
I not at all.
yeah,
Uh,
it's
but
quite a
but
place.
but you are right. I mean, you are dealing with life-changing events for people, huge life-changing events, and not to be drawn in emotionally would thank goodness it's impossible. Yeah.
Yeah, and the experiences that the folks have here, and Bill, one of the things that really covered what I consider to be the spectrum was we have folks who are almost brand new who had started only a month or two before, up into 38-year employees, people that actually span the last 2 DAs, from Kevin Burke to John Blodgett to my beginning here in January of this year. So just the depth and the breadth of what the folks brought, it was a great beginning. And I also wanted the message to go out clearly that I valued what the employees had to say, and it really went well, and it was very sincere.
Yeah. Paula, how about sharing with us? Now, you came from the state legislature as former police chief in Salem and policeman in Salem, but as a legislator, very active in a number of these different types of issues. We'll get to that in a moment. But tell us if you've had any interactions. I'm sure you have with legislators on the issues from your point of view now as a DA, and also any notes from any of your travels around Essex County. Obviously, a far wider area now that you have that you're serving.
Yeah, 34 cities and towns, and very diverse communities from the largest cities of Lynn and Lawrence, where we have strong diversity, to smaller towns of Wenham and West Newbury and Hamilton and everything in between, mid-sized cities like Salem and Beverly. I've traveled to every community so far, and myself and the top team, we've made a point. We are more than halfway through meeting with every municipality. And what we do is whoever the head of the government is, whether it's a mayor or a town manager, town administrator, board of selectmen, the superintendent, and the police chief, and in some cases, the fire chiefs as well. And I've been having some great interactions with my colleagues. I view this job, Bill, not so much in a solely prosecutorial way, but as a community job, a community resource. And to that end, in fact, this morning I was up in Merrimack Valley at a legislative breakfast up there, and I saw my colleagues, Rep. Wynn, I saw Rep. Ramos, Rep. Kastner, and really comparing notes and talking about things. I've been at the State House 3 times already, twice on budget matters with the House and the Senate Ways and Means, making sure that the budget here at the DA's office really is to keep up with the work that we're doing. I've gone back in to talk about some updates, some law updates, some different things around dangerousness bills and what we can be doing better. So the 8 years that I spent at the State House making these connections and leaving on very good terms, I think it served me well, and it'll serve the office well.
I know in your that you've had like 4 focus areas. One of them is public safety, and coming from that side originally as a police officer, and again as Salem Police Chief. Tell us how you're seeing the role now of public safety through the scope of the district attorney's office.
Yeah, it's a great question, Bill, and that's one of the top 4 of the priorities. And it really is about being smart on crime and smart prosecutorial decisions. I think that there's a school of thought sometimes that say everything should be punishment based, that everybody should be paying the maximum penalty. And frankly, I think we got that wrong for many, many years. There are lots of folks on the other end of that spectrum. Somebody that has mental health issues, somebody with substance use issues. We're seeing a lot, particularly post-COVID. And a lot of these folks have had some things happen in their lives that might have led them to make some bad decisions. When we look at juveniles, we know that the longer we keep juveniles out of the criminal justice system, the much better path they have to success. Kevin Burke said it to me best when I met with him. Kevin was a terrific DA for 24 years. He told me better outcomes for offenders are better outcomes for society and for public safety. The fact of the matter is that many of the folks that are incarcerated are getting out at some point, and we need to make sure that when they re-enter society and reintegrate, they're in a place that's much better than what got them there in the first place. I also know the difference between balancing somebody who deserves a second chance, somebody who has substance use issues or some type of mental health, and balance that against somebody who's trafficking in fentanyl, which is the scourge of opiates. And frankly, we've lost 2,400 people in Massachusetts last year. These are folks who were in the grip of addiction, and in many cases started with prescription drugs and had some difficulties with that. We saw some terrible, tragic stories. Those are the folks that we need to be helping. The folks that are in the grip of addiction and making sure that we make good, smart decisions to help people and know when someone has to face some consequences.
Paul, you mentioned COVID, and I want to follow up on that because we often, I've talked with people about how students and teachers are kind of dealing with a post-COVID kind of classroom situation now, how it's impacted people, how it impacts seniors, isolation and those kinds of things. How has it impacted, say, the court system or what the court system deals with?
Yeah, I think the courts did as good a job as they could, Bill, and I have high compliments for how the trial court handled COVID and trying to make sure that literally the wheels of justice kept on turning, but in a way that also made sure that folks who were having difficulties having that taken into consideration. What we're seeing now is a number of cases that have been on the docket for longer than normal, but we're really trying to catch up. And I think that the folks on the defense bar and on the prosecutorial side, I think we're seeing some really good moving forward. Somebody that is in this criminal justice system deserves to have a fair justice and at a fair pace. And I think that the collaboration of the trial court, I think the judges have done an excellent job of moving these cases and making sure that folks are getting the justice in as timely a manner as they can. I do worry to one extent, Bill, and that's I don't think that we've seen the end result of COVID. We're still seeing lots of cases. People are suffering. I spent a lot of times, and I continue to spend a lot of time in the school systems. I was just up at Salem High School last week. I've been to a number of other schools. I was up in Lawrence, meeting with the Lawrence teachers last week. I'm very concerned that we haven't yet seen the peak of difficulties that people are having in COVID. And I do really think it's an all hands on deck approach between schools, municipalities, the DA's office. We can work together on these things and try to help people get through it.
Yeah, I think you're probably right on all of that. Yeah. What about victim rights? That's another one of your priorities, or being fair, being servicing victims, or dealing with victims of crime. So tell us what your view on that is, and how you're dealing with that, or possibly making changes or tweaks with what the DA's office does.
Yeah, it's very, very important to me and to the staff here to make sure that victims are part of any case that goes forward, whether it's a victim's family or somebody who's been victimized by crime themselves. One of the departments that we have here under the auspices of the DA's office is the Victim Witness Department. Our chief of VW is Maureen Leal. She's been here for a couple of decades, and I can tell you I've had the advocates in. They do an extraordinary job. They will walk somebody through the system. I've gone up to court over the last couple of months. I've gone up and met with families who've lost a loved one to violence. And every single family member, everyone without exception, has talked about the meaningful relationship they've developed with our victim witness people. There's some extraordinary folks that are in there working every single day, not getting the headlines, but working with these families. We're very aggressive about this. We assign, if somebody's a victim of a crime, particularly a homicide, we will assign a victim witness advocate immediately to start helping that family. We've done it a couple of times over the weekend. Sometimes we will hold off on letting the press know about things until the next of kin is notified. You know, I've personally made sure that the office is very transparent about getting information out to the public through the media, which is we've had a good relationship with. And our victim witness folks are the backbone of that. They're doing all the work in the trenches. And it's important. If we don't have a criminal justice system without having the victims play an important part, and we make sure that that happens.
Paul, I know you talked a bit about juvenile justice just a moment ago, but it's one of your priorities as a legislator. As I mentioned earlier, you are very active in kind of restructuring juvenile justice here with Massachusetts laws from the state house's point of view. And so now you're getting to see it through a different lens in a different time, a couple of years later, so to speak, from the DA's office. Give me your take on juvenile justice at this point.
Yeah, and you're right, Bill. I did have the opportunity and the good fortune for my 8 years at the State House to work on a lot of juvenile justice reform. I was very fortunate with Senator Cream. We co-chaired the Emerging Adults and Adolescent Task Force, and looking for best practices. And interesting, just last week, I met with some public defenders for the Committee for Public Counsel, and they actually had my report, and they had read it, and they concurred with a lot of what we recommended there. I'm looking here to put a lot of those and implement a lot of the best practices in here at the DA's office. We work really closely with our juvenile justice unit. I've met with the judges in the juvenile court. I've spent some time up in Lawrence. We're really looking to have as robust a juvenile diversion as we can. We know the data is very clear. The longer we can keep somebody out of the system, and as long as we do it with public safety in mind, we know that their chance of success is much better. I want to add one other piece, Bill. It's something that is really important to me. And that's something called restorative justice, where in appropriate cases, where victims of a crime and the perpetrators of those crimes, the defendants, will sit across from each other and have a dialogue and try to come to some type of understanding. It works. I've seen it work. We can't use it in every single case, but often in a lot of these cases, particularly in these misdemeanors. And if this restorative justice is successful, it will spare that young person from having a record. And we've seen the data. It's very successful. I intend to have as robust a juvenile justice program as possible.
you mentioned best practices. That was probably just one of them that you were just talking to me about. But what's it? Give me another example of a best practice that could probably be amplified.
Yeah, a lot of it is finding out with individual justice, and if we're speaking particularly about juveniles, finding out what's happening, and it's really a wraparound approach. Is what's happening at home, what's happening at schools. I've been going to these community collaborative initiative meetings. It's when the schools meet with the police, with DYS, with social workers. I've attended 4 of them already, and the best practice would dictate what's going on from an individual standpoint with that young person. Is there domestic violence in the home? Is there substance use issues? And what we hope to do is really kind of get right down to what's specific to this case, not a one size fits all. And I think that the more resources that we can put into this, we're helping people. It's one person at a time, but the greater good is that this person will stay on a good path. Sometimes some of these young folks need some type of mental health counseling. We've had some people that we've sent to a juvenile fire starters program. Making some bad decisions. Sometimes some of these pranks and malicious damages get out of control. What's the issue? What's driving this? And it's really a holistic approach of bringing everybody that has some touch upon that juvenile, teachers, friends, other members of the community, and really putting a lot of resources into that. These things work, and that's my intention.
Right, and it's about communicating, from among the different silos of the where these young people are interacting with society, whether it be the schools or or the police or whomever other agencies. So yeah,
Yeah, you said it right, Bill. And it was silos. Too often, the schools may not have known what the police were doing, and they may not have known what other community leaders were doing. It's really breaking all those things down. And I don't think Essex is the only county that does. I think there's some versions, but I want to make sure that we're doing the best that we can.
Finally, let me ask you about equity and systematic equity. How do you see that from taking office as the new Essex County DA?
I think there's 2 ways to look at it, Bill. One is equity among the people that we're serving in the criminal justice system, and making sure that we're doing everything to literally make it fair and just. I look at the numbers of defendants. I look at the numbers of people that are being held, and we're really drilling down. We're looking very deeply at these things to try to help the folks and have the best outcomes that we can. The second part of it is to diversify my office. We've been meeting at different law schools, recruiting assistant DAs. I've spoken with members of the Black and Latino community. Some law schools have minority student groups. We're reaching out directly to them to try to bring them on board. We just brought a number of Spanish-speaking support staff on. We service the community, and if we don't look or sound like the community, then I think we're not doing the best job that we can. So both of those examples are very, very important. We're also working with a couple of municipal leaders in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space as well. I just think it's important in this day and age, and I think it also sends a message to the community at large that we care about these things, that we care about the community. I really view this job as a community resource.
Yeah. Paul, is there anything I haven't asked you about your first months on the job there, or anything happening in the next week or two that you want to share with us, as kind of a parting shot, if you will?
Yeah, I think it plays into my view as community, Bill. We just put out 12 or 13 little mini grants totaling $25,000 for after prom activities, good, safe things. The other piece that I do want to mention, it's important to me, and that's the mental health of our first responders. I knew this for 32 years on the job, and most of those as a detective at some difficult crime scenes. Our ADAs go out to these crime scenes, our police officers, our firefighters, our EMS. I just think that in this world that we live in, I never want to miss the opportunity to make sure that we help and take care of the folks who take care of us. We've been to some difficult scenes in my first 120 days, and I've reached out to the chiefs in each one of those communities to make sure their officers are okay as well. And I think we owe a debt of gratitude. We have a tremendous state police contingent attached to my office here. These troopers are out every day working with the local police officers on some really difficult things, and I want to make sure that not a day goes by that we don't make sure that we appreciate them as well.
just to follow up on that one note, we've talked about victims, we've talked about those that are, that are in the system, if you will. But I do want to ask you, being a former police officer and police chief, what about our law enforcement people? Where are they at today? Because we've from the noting that the last couple of years have been pretty tough on them, nationally and maybe not so much locally, I don't think. But where do you think they're at, and how can we support them better?
There's no question the job of a police officer today is extremely difficult, probably as difficult as it's ever been. Fortunately, in Massachusetts, I think that overwhelmingly, and I can't overstate that, overwhelmingly, the men and women of law enforcement in Massachusetts at all of the levels, state, county, and local, are by and large, they're men and women that are out every day for the right reason under some really extraordinarily difficult circumstances. We know that we've seen things across the country, in other parts of the country, and we also know that sometimes there are folks that do things that are incompatible with their job. I have to say that overwhelmingly in Massachusetts, we have terrific police departments. It's been a pleasure to be a police officer and to continue to work with them. And that's why I never want to miss the opportunity to thank the men and women of law enforcement. I'll tell you, Bill, the officers that I know and have worked with and collaborated with, they don't want anybody on their job that doesn't deserve to have that badge. And I can say that unequivocally.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, District Attorney Paul Tucker, thanks so much for your time. We really appreciate it, and thanks for all the updates, and best of luck here in the months ahead.
Thank you, Bill. Best to you and your listeners as well.